Trump likes Carney, but some premiers don't like Poilievre. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
The answers you need
from the people in the know.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
Well, he loomed large over Canada's election, and U.S. President Donald Trump is now commenting on its outcome. A Liberal win and Prime Minister Mark Carney? Trump likes it.
Are you interested in rebuilding relations with Canada? And if so, how?
No, well, I think we're going to have a great relationship. He called me up yesterday. He said, "Let's make a deal." You know, he was running for office. They both hated Trump, and it was the one that hated Trump, I think, the least that won. I actually think the conservative hated me much more than the so-called liberal. He's a pretty liberal guy. But no, I spoke to him yesterday. Couldn't have been nicer, and I congratulated him. You know, it was a very mixed signal because it's almost even, which makes it very complicated for the country. It's a pretty tight race, but he's a very nice gentleman, and he's going to come to the White House very shortly, within the next week or less.
Prime Minister Mark Carney is also commenting on the outcome of the election, but not with the Canadian news media. Carney's first post-election interview was with the BBC.
What will your message be to Donald Trump down south?
Well, it will be the same message that I've given him directly and I've been saying publicly, which is that we're two sovereign nations. There is a partnership to be had, an economic and security partnership to be had. It's going to be a very different one than we've had in the past. But also, we've got lots of other things to do. We can build out our economy here at home. We are in the process of building our relationships more deeply in Europe, elsewhere around the world. So we'll have a partnership on our terms. There's a win-win possibility there, but on our terms, not on their terms.
Will you visit him quickly, do you think?
It depends. I've been to Washington. I've been to the White House. I've seen it. I've seen all the monuments. I've been to Florida even. So I'm not going as a tourist. I'll go when there's a serious discussion to be had.
While Carney and Trump prepare for their first meeting, back home it's turmoil for the Conservatives. They lost the election, and the Conservative Party leader, Pierre Poilievre, lost his own seat. One of the storylines of the election campaign was the rift between progressive Conservative premiers and Pierre Poilievre and his campaign manager, Jenny Byrne. Ontario Premier Doug Ford was asked about that rift again yesterday.
Why is there so much bad blood between you and the federal party? And how does the federal party start to build bridges now within the Conservative movement as they look to the next 4 years?
Well, all they have to do is make a phone call. I like a lot of the MPs, but the people spoke, and they spoke loud and clear. They spoke loud and clear in our election, and they spoke loud and clear on the federal election. And so that's democracy. They elect who they want.
Also speaking out about the divide between the federal Conservative Party and provincial progressive Conservatives was Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston. There were reports during the election campaign about bad blood between those two camps as well.
The question is, why didn't you come out and support Pierre Poilievre when he was here in Nova Scotia?
I stayed out of the federal election. I did vote for my local candidate Bryson, but I stayed out of the campaigning aspect of it.
And Lindsay, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes. How can the federal party, the federal Conservative Party, begin to build bridges with you and the progressive Conservative movement in Nova Scotia?
Just reach out.
Premier Houston also said the federal Conservative Party needs to do some soul searching.
The federal election, I stayed clear of. I wrote to both the letters with letters to both the leaders on issues that matter to Nova Scotians. But I think just on the Conservative movement in general, I think the Conservative Party of Canada, I hope they do some soul searching. what they believe it means to be a conservative. There are many, many shades of blue, and I think that people will see that the way I govern, and they'll see that in our caucus and our party members, that we work with Nova Scotians. We'll work with anyone.
They would like to be better served by doing that, by electing a new leader, do you think? Now that
that'll be for them to decide. That'll be the Conservative Party of Canada. Their membership will decide that. Their caucus will. That's for them to decide. I'm just excited to work with the new government and anyone who wants to help advance the interests of Nova Scotia.
Pierre Poilievre does have a supporter in at least one premier's office, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith thinks Poilievre should remain the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada.
He did win more seats. He won more votes. He lost his own seat in Carleton. So should he stay on as the leader of the federal Conservative?
I think he should stay on. And I've told him so. I think that he can find another riding where it may be a little bit easier to be able to win. I think that the people who won last night, I think that they will all agree that they won because of the efforts of the leader of the party. He just didn't spend as much time in his home riding to secure the win back home, but I don't see any reason why he shouldn't stay on.
The frontrunner to fill the Poilievre void in the House of Commons when Parliament resumes is former Conservative Party leader Andrew Scheer, who also supports Poilievre remaining on as leader of the Conservative Party. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
With my friend on the right side of things, Michael Taube is back with us. Syndicated columnist and speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Welcome back.
Hey, Rob. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Good to hear from you. What is your reaction to the election outcome?
I don't think it's any surprise that I wasn't pleased by it, but I mean, that's an easy opening line. Unlike some conservatives, I don't think it's the end of the world what's happened, but it was not a good result in the sense that the expectations were much, much higher. And as I'm sure we'll talk about in the segment, the election was largely determined by one individual and basically one issue, neither of which had much to do with Canada. But in the end, I mean, the one thing that people can take solace from if they were not in favor of the Liberals and didn't support them is that the Liberals were held to another minority government, a bigger one than before, but another minority government. The Conservatives, which I'm sure we'll get into more, did well overall in the sense that they gained about 20 plus seats and had the highest total and popular support of any incarnation of a Conservative Party since Brian Mulroney back in 1988. But there's a lot of interesting components to it in a minority government that, may last a little while, but in the end, even with the Prime Minister Mark Carney and the Liberals having a fairly big number, I think will ultimately be a traditional minority government of maybe about a year or two.
Okay. All right. So as a Conservative Party supporter, how do you feel about the Conservative performance on election night?
Well, I sort of went through it. I mean, again, it could have been obviously much better, and I think it would have been much better, quite frankly, if, U.S. President Donald Trump and his threat of tariffs had not really taken over, for the most part, this election. Liberals are obviously going to celebrate it, and they're talking about, or they're mentioning various talking points that you would expect them to say, which is that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives had sort of a cumulative average of a 25-point lead just before the election was called, and it all dissipated. They're obviously claiming that they had something to do with it, and that Mark Carney, who has been Prime Minister only since March 14th and has been really unimpressive in that role those few weeks, that he is the reason why all this happened. He can believe whatever he wants. The Liberals can say whatever they want. They can spin whatever they want. But anyone with a little bit of sense who was actually reading and paying attention to what was going on knows full well that Donald Trump and tariffs was the reason that everything switched. Because if you look at obviously the support and totals that the New Democratic Party and the Bloc Québécois received, the BQ went down 12 plus seats. The New Democrats nearly got wiped out in the election, And that progressive vote shifted over to Carney, who, for whatever reason, was believed to be the best person who could take on Donald Trump when it comes to tariffs and Canada's safety and security, even though there was nothing there to it. It was just spin, and it worked.
Well, how much of that is a failing then of the Conservative Party to adapt to that campaign reality? Whether it was, the serious threat that it was a big thing during the campaign, obviously, because it probably had the biggest influence on the outcome. So how much of that is a failing of the Conservative Party not to adjust their message to that?
Well, it's one of those rare instances, in my opinion, where it's minimal. And the reason why I think it's minimal is because, yes, people were shouting and yelling that Pierre Poilievre has to do the same as the other parties. Yell and scream about Donald Trump, isolate him, claim that you're, standing up for this value, this thing here and there, and that was how you're going to differentiate yourself. But it doesn't. Everyone else was doing the same thing. And the Conservatives and Mr. Poilievre, if you look at it, did actually oppose Donald Trump and his tariffs, did make statements, did make videos, said it in interviews, and people just turned the other way. Now, sure, you can argue, well, that's a failing that the message didn't catch on. But is it a failing that the message didn't catch on, or that people just didn't want to listen? Because if you look at how the numbers went down, and I'm about to write a series of things on it, and if you look at polling data that existed at the time for what it's worth, you can see that a lot of people in Canada had made up their minds, as I said before, that, with the mistaken belief that Mark Carney was the best person to take on Donald Trump, even though he was politically inexperienced, has an arrogant behavior, a massive ego, is very aloof, and most importantly, there was nothing to it because he barely knew the man to begin with. How does someone like this jump 10 to 15 points ahead of Pierre Poilievre or any other political leader as someone that people have confidence in? Because he was an economist, because he was a former central banker? None of these things matter. You have to look at Trump as well. Trump marches to the beat of his own drummer. He's a completely different political animal than anyone we've ever seen before. He doesn't follow the conventional political playbook. How can you go after him? Well, not the way Carney's going to do it, who doesn't have much of a backbone. You had to take a stronger stance, but a firm stance where you were willing to work together. And that's what Pierre Poilievre said throughout, that he defended Canada, that the Conservative Party would obviously stand up for Canada when it comes to issues like tariffs, trade, immigration, problems at the border, etc. And people only listened up to a point. And sometimes in life, when you run campaigns, and I've worked in many of them, you can only do so much. And if you change your message too often, then people start pointing to you and saying, well, they won't even stay consistent in terms of the points that they're proposing. Sometimes you have to basically fight on the positions and the principles that you believe in and the stance that you think you should take. And if you deviate too much, it can become disastrous.
Okay. Coming up next, Pierre Poilievre not only lost the election, but lost his own seat. So what's next for Pierre Poilievre? Back with Michael Taube, syndicated columnist, speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Well, one of the big subplots to this election campaign is Pierre Poilievre's future and whether he should stay or go as leader of the Conservative Party. What do you think should happen, given he lost his own seat?
Well, that does happen, unfortunately, and we can go a bit more into it. But no, I don't think there's anywhere he needs to go, and I think he should remain as the Conservative leader because overall he did extremely well. Like I said, he increased the party's total by more than 20 seats. He gained the highest popular support for any Conservative party since the days of Brian Mulroney in 1988. He got a higher percentage of popular support than my old friend and boss, Stephen Harper, did in 3 elections. It's just unfortunate the way it broke down, as we talked about in the first segment, that Donald Trump and tariffs and a lot of the progressive left moving into the liberal camp that just sort of muck things up. But that's the way it happens sometimes in politics. You can only control so much. But no, him losing his seat while everyone who is a critic is enjoying this moment and laughing at it, you have to look at a number of things. And you know this quite well, Rob, and many of the listeners do too. Well, everyone talks about the fact, and it is correct, that Pierre Poilievre won his seat, or at least two different ridings. One, obviously, his original riding, and then the redistricted one, which is Carleton, for 21 years. He did have a couple of struggles, especially in Carleton, that he got through with very small percentages of winning overall in elections where the Conservatives actually also won government. It has been a difficult riding. As well, more recently, some aspects of Carleton have been redistricted to a point where there were people in the riding, much like any federal riding that gets gerrymandered, where sometimes you get advantageous portions and then less advantageous ones. It happens. The other thing to also keep in mind, and
I would also say it's not as rural as it, if I could just interrupt, Mike.
All Conservative candidates struggled badly. It was one of the worst regions for Conservatives to run in.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, Poilievre got caught in this too.
Yeah, I would just say there's been a lot of growth in that riding. There's still a large segment of it that is rural Conservative leaning, but there's been a lot of development and growth, and a lot of it that used to be rural is not rural anymore. It's suburban now.
Sure.
And there are a lot of people who work for the government that work there. But look, our time is tight, so you think he should stay, right?
Yes, I do. I see no reason why not. And plus, there's the other problem that if you always do this one and done thing with Conservative leaders, which we've had happen with Andrew Scheer, Aaron O'Toole, and some people are mumbling about Poilievre, it's going to eventually stop good people from running for the Conservative leadership, because what do they need this for? The old rule of thumb was 2 kicks at the can, 2 elections. That's how it worked when I was growing up and worked in politics. That's what a lot of the listeners probably remember, and that's the way it should be here. So Poilievre lost his seat. It's unfortunate, but he gained so much for the party in the past election, or just this past election, that there is no rational reason to do it. So no, I would not be in favor of
Could you see him
leaving leadership or going? No.
You see him running in a rural Alberta riding then, in a by-election?
Well, he was born and raised in Alberta, so why not? I would think that actually would make a lot of sense. But again, it depends who wants to give up their seat and whether, they can find a way to comfortably have the person exit and him enter. And if it works, great.
Okay. That's our time. Thank you. See what next week brings.
Okay.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Take care, Rob.
That's Michael Taube, syndicated columnist. You can look for him from time to time in the pages of the National Post, and speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper.
The Newsday Panel.
Yes, it is time for our Newsday Panel. Kate Harrison is back, Vice Chair at Summa Strategies. How are you, Kate?
I'm doing okay, Rob. How are you?
That's good. That's good. Ashton Arsenault is here, partner at Crestview Strategy. Good to hear from you.
Good to be here, Rob.
Yeah, hi, Ashton. Good to hear from you. So let's start with some kind of big picture reaction to the outcome of the election campaign. A Liberal win, a Conservative loss, pretty strong minority position here for Prime Minister Mark Carney. Kate, why do you think it turned out the way it did?
Well, I think neither team, emerges from the election seeing it as a massive victory. I think that a lot of Liberals had their expectations for a majority government. Those weren't met. Obviously, the Conservatives had aspirations on governing. Those weren't met. So I think that that nobody's really emerging from this with a real raw sense at the moment. But in terms of why it went the way it did, I think the Liberals are really effective in seizing timing and a mood of the moment in terms of Trump and the threat of the U.S. And they were particularly effective at weaponizing that moment into voter support from key demographics that turn out in elections, in older people. I also don't want to discount Prime Minister Carney's CV. And, for a lot of people, they see our economy in shambles. They see that Mark Carney was a governor of 2 central banks, and they think that maybe he's the right guy to fix it. I'm aware of a lot of people that were voting for the man, not the party, and he was polling well above his party. But because it's a minority, Rob, I really do think that perhaps that more centrist agenda that Carney had been promising may get pushed to the wayside. He will still have to make deals with the lefty blockists and the NDP in order to get his agenda through. And I think that could have the end result of looking like a very Trudeau era style and approach to governance, and including on spending. So those that were hoping for a move to the middle on the Liberal side might not get that as a function and result of the minority government.
Oh, really? Okay. Why do you think the election turned out the way it did, Ashton?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with most of what Kate said. You know, I'm sure Kate's in this position as well. I spent an awful lot of time at the doors over the course of this campaign, had a couple of friends running, some more successful than others. And, you know, I'll say God is my witness. Pretty well, 8 out of 10 doors I knocked on with somebody in that residence of, 55 or above. I heard about Trump. I heard about tariffs. So to the point on timing, if this election happens in the fall of 2024, the landscape is probably almost entirely different than the result we got on Monday night. And I think it's just one of those things whereby, timing was not friendly to the Conservative Party of Canada. And when you look sort of big picture, the complete and utter erosion of the NDP vote is ultimately what did the Conservative Party of Canada in. If we go back in time, I mean, if you had told me that the next federal election, the Conservative Party of Canada would end up with 41.3% of the popular vote, they take that every single time. They take that every single time. And 99 out of 100 times, that's probably a majority government. It wasn't this time.
Yeah. No. Now, this number, 169 seats, I mean, it's a pretty good number for the Liberals. How surprised would you be, Kate, if maybe in the next few days or weeks that number is turned into 172 because people cross the floor?
I honestly, I would be quite surprised.
You would be?
I think that the NDP, members of the NDP, there was a torch headline around Jenny Kwan maybe considering this, and she shut that down very fast. And I don't know how necessary it would be for to do that, honestly, Rob, because there are things that the government can do, like, for example, consider giving the NDP official party status. That would be a nice overture without necessarily expecting or asking them to cross the floor. I'm sure the Liberals are making those calls, don't get me wrong, but I would be surprised to see that happen in a way that actually truly shifted this into a majority mandate. I think that they can probably take advantage of an official opposition with no leader in the House, at least for the foreseeable future, and the New Democrats being leaderless to work with them, at least on a case-by-case basis, to get some things done. And if I were the NDP, I'd be trying to negotiate for official party status and the benefits that come with that as a means to that end, and allowing the Liberals to get part of their agenda through.
What do you think? Floor crossings on the way, Ashton, do you think?
I doubt it, and they don't need it.
You doubt it? Don't need it.
The reality is, I mean, the NDP in particular, and, I'll add the Bloc in there as well, but the NDP in particular, to the extent that it still exists, I mean, the furthest thing from their mind at this point in time is angling towards another federal election. They quite simply do not have the resources to make that happen. And what happened to them on Monday night actually makes that all the more worse for them. So they are in deep, deep, deep financial trouble. They're going to have to regroup. So from my vantage point, I think for at least 18 months, maybe more, the Carney government essentially will operate as a majority government. And I don't think they're going to see too many obstacles thrown up against their legislation, if I'm being honest with you, for better or worse.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
I
mean, some people on election night were saying, well, we'll be in, sorry, Kate, some people on election night were saying we're going to be into an election in another year. I don't see that.
No way. I mean, now I will say there are people musing on the other side that this is going to go the distance. I don't think so. The NDP just saw what the consequence of voting alongside the Liberals for the better part of 4 years delivered for them electorally. And equally, I don't think that the Liberals are keen to have a supply and confidence arrangement-esque agreement with the New Democrats, as they want to show a demarcation between administrations. So I think 18 to 24 months, part of me sounds right, but I don't know that this goes the full 4 years.
Okay. When we come back, we'll talk about Pierre Poilievre and his future after this election result. What's next for Pierre Poilievre? Is he going to be ousted as the leader of the Conservative Party? Does he live to fight another election as leader of the Conservative Party? What do you think, Ashton?
So, I mean, ultimately, I think he is going to stay on. I think he'll fight to stay on. And I think that's probably the correct direction for the party. The results on Monday, while not ideal for the Conservative Party of Canada, I think yielded a lot of very positive takeaways that I think puts the party in very, very good position whenever the next federal election might be. And the circumstances are a little bit different than the previous leaders will have to understand, right? So, yes, the Conservative Party has shown itself to be rather adept in the last few years at using the Reform Act and the principles therein, but the circumstances of this leadership were, quite a bit different. Pierre won that leadership race in an absolute landslide, and many attribute the success that the party did have, to the extent that it was successful on Monday night, to him and his leadership. And based on what I'm seeing right now, nobody has really raised their hand to speak out of turn, certainly not publicly, about his leadership. And so I'm still seeing an awful lot of caucus unity. That having been said, a couple of things have to happen, right? I think, probably behind closed doors and within caucus, whenever that first meeting happens, there's probably going to be some contrition. Probably it would be in good order to outline what next steps look like in terms of his leadership. And then there's just, sort of basic fundamental things that have to happen, right? He's going to have to get a seat. That's a challenge. That's a problem. But I see no viable or real threat to his leadership at this point in time. And I think the membership of the Conservative Party, by and large, continued to support his leadership. So I'd be quite surprised if there were a different leader at the helm.
See him surviving. What about you, Kate?
Yeah, I do as well. I think that what Ashton just spoke about in terms of the gains that were made with what I would describe as the new Conservative voter coalition, the new right for Canada, really hard to understate that. These were inroads in key electoral ridings, but with key demographics as well, that I think present an opportunity for a real, if nurtured and if repeated, and those are big ifs, and that's going to take a lot of work, just to Ashton's point on next steps. But if managed correctly, could be a very powerful voting bloc for Conservatives in Canada moving forward. So this was step one to get there. Obviously, we wanted it to only be a one-step process. Maybe it needs to be two. So Ashton's also very correct that this cannot be a finger-pointing exercise in making the loss someone else's problem. There does need to be some accountability. There does need to be some humility. Frankly, losing your seat will deliver that for you. But this cannot just be a finger-pointing exercise where, it's anybody's problem but our own. And there does need to be some reflection of that, including in reaching out to caucus and having some, probably in some cases, difficult conversations with people. That has to happen in short order.
Kate, how realistic do you think it is that a winning Conservative MP would vacate, somehow announce they're leaving politics for one reason or another, and there would be a by-election that Pierre Poilievre could run in? How realistic is a scenario like that, do you think?
I think that we would be foolish to suggest that that's an easy thing to have happen. And there's two parts to that. Number one, there's an economic reality for the person that makes the choice or is asked to step aside, having just been elected. You can say what you want about servitude and being a fan of the leader. That's a pretty big ask. So I don't think that should be treated lightly. The other thing too, you've heard me talk about this example before, Rob. It was my riding that John Tory decided to run in 2008 after losing the losing the election, in his own seat in 2007, provincially, running in a quote-unquote safe seat of Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes Brock,
right,
and had his butt handed to him. So I think we should not think any seat is safe, any seat is a lock. You can bet that our opponents will be putting all sorts of money and resources into whatever seat that is. So I think this is something they need to take their time with. I don't think that they should be rushing to determine where that seat is. They need to really make sure they get it right. And it is a big personal sacrifice for whoever it is that makes that call, and that needs to be acknowledged as well.
I'll ask you about that as well, Ashton, but we'll have to wait until we come back. Ashton, maybe I could get a comment from you on what you think is ahead for Poilievre as he tries to find a riding to run in. What's that going to be like for him?
Yeah, same principles as Kate, but I approach it with a little bit more urgency. And I only say that because, look, this process is going to, I think, at least take 6 months or so. But I approach it with a little bit more urgency just because I think it's going to be not only difficult for Poilievre personally to sort of, in a way, be on the outside looking in, but it's also going to present quite awkwardly from a public perspective. There will have to be some sort of interim, leader of the official opposition. And so, to be on the outside of that chamber where he's spent the last 20 years, quite effectively shredding his opponents, I think is just going to be somewhat difficult for him to manage on a personal level. And so, the suggestion would be let's sort that out sooner rather than later. But it has to be the right pick, obviously, to Kate's point around John Tory, which is a great example, by the way.
Okay.
Sad one for me personally. Lots of PTSD as I brought that up, but it felt appropriate.
All right. Okay. I want to ask you not so much about the remarks from Premier Ford and Premier Houston in Nova Scotia about their lack of a working relationship with Pierre Poilievre. That's well documented now. I guess the more obvious question is, are either of those two plotting to replace Pierre Poilievre? Do they have their sights set on becoming the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada? What do you think, Kate?
I really don't think so, Rob. And I think that a lot of this spat, if you want to call it that, is being a bit blown out of proportion in terms of what it means for the movement, what it means for Conservatives that are working together, on the ground. I think Jason Kenney on election night put it very well, and in my opinion, best when he talked about the fact that this seems to be very personally driven, and by, a handful of people that have some history and some beef, and, far be it for me to go down that path of what's legitimate and what's not. But what I do know is that there's a lot of federal Conservatives that are feeling a bit betrayed by Ontario and their interventions and their interjections during this campaign. But what I would say, as somebody who's been involved with both parties for about 2 decades now, is that this is not helpful. That's an understatement. But if you're not going to commit to be friends, then at least commit to do no harm. And, I really don't observe that fracture beyond the personalities involved. So it's going to involve some combination or all of those people coming together and hashing it out and determining that they're not going to continue to do harm, because it's really not something that's felt beyond the half dozen people that are really at the center of this, for my estimation.
What do you think, Ashton?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it a step further. I don't think either of them could win in the current Conservative Party.
Oh, really? Okay.
To be blunt. Yeah, look, Kate is, of course, correct. This seems to be personal animus that has spilled over. I'm sure it's going to be one of those questions that, quite frankly, should be addressed in the upcoming caucus meetings for the Conservative Party. I think it has to be. It's sort of reached a fever pitch at this point. It's basically free ammunition for those that wish ill will upon you, and to have this playing out in the headlines day in, day out, I don't think is really helpful for anybody involved. So I do hope it's something that's addressed, and whatever personal beefs are happening behind the scenes, I think it's probably high time it gets squashed. If not friendly, then at least stay out of each other's business.
Agree.
You couldn't see it sometime off in the future, a couple of years from now, Conservative Party leader of Canada, Tim Houston? You couldn't see that? No?
I don't, Rob, but, things change. So ask me again in the future. Maybe I have a different answer.
Il ne parle pas français. But also, Tim Houston has been very deliberate in distancing himself from the federal Conservatives well before Pierre Poilievre took the helm. He weighed in on this in 2021 when it was Aaron O'Toole, after the Conservative Party had some, I'll say, contentious or controversial vote around climate change, climate action. He was very deliberate in pointing out that he was not a federal Conservative. I think that there's some personal feelings here. And again, some are legitimate, some are not. What's not helpful is this spilling out into the open ecosystem, but I think we're taking it a bit too far to suggest leadership aspirations from either of them.
We love it. We love it. We love a good soap opera, Kate. Come on.
Speak for yourself. Speak for yourself.
All right. We'll speak soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Take care.
Yeah, great stuff today. Yeah, Ashton Arsenault, partner at Crestview Strategy. Kate Harrison, vice chair at Summa Strategies. I'm Rob Snow. Talkback is coming up right after the news at the top of the hour here on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. And today, the new Liberal government. The new Liberal government. And here's a question for you today, everyone. What can the new Liberal government, led by the new Liberal Prime Minister, Mark Carney, do to show you that it's different from the last Liberal government, led by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau? 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. What can the new Liberal government, led by Prime Minister Mark Carney, do to show you that it's different from the last government, led by Prime Minister Trudeau? Because the reality is, the Liberals are in charge. They won the election. They're not going anywhere. It will be a Liberal government for the foreseeable future, led by Prime Minister Mark Carney. And the reality also is Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was deeply unpopular. And Liberal fortunes were revived only after Justin Trudeau announced he was resigning. That was one of the big turning points ahead of the election campaign. Once Justin Trudeau announced he was leaving the scene, it's obvious that many people who said they were going to vote for the Conservatives weren't Conservatives. They were just people who couldn't stand Justin Trudeau. And once Justin Trudeau was gone, they were willing to give the Liberals a second look, and it turns out a fourth chance. And enough of those people turned out during the election campaign and voted for the Liberals, and now the Liberals have a fourth term. Mark Carney said throughout the campaign, he's not Justin Trudeau. He's different from Justin Trudeau, and he is a change from Justin Trudeau, and his government will be different from Justin Trudeau's government. How can he prove that to you? How can he prove that to you? What can he do to show you that he's not the same old, that this is not a case of meet the new boss, same as the old boss, meet the new government, same as the old government? Some might say he's done some of that already. Mark Carney canceled the carbon tax, the consumer carbon tax. Mark Carney canceled the planned increase in the capital gains inclusion rate. Those were two things that the Trudeau government put in place and defended. In the case of the carbon tax, they defended the carbon tax. I mean, think about it. They defended the carbon tax for almost 7 years. They fought 3 elections over the carbon tax. They fought and won a case about the carbon tax at the Supreme Court of Canada. And then Mark Carney came along and canceled it. What else can Mark Carney do to show you, to prove to you that he's not like Justin Trudeau? That he really is going to be a different kind of prime minister than Justin Trudeau was. Because let's face it, if Justin Trudeau had stuck around and tried to ride it out, it wouldn't be a Liberal government today. It wouldn't be Prime Minister Mark Carney. It would more than likely be Prime Minister Pierre Poilievre. And right now, maybe there's some recency bias, but right now, most Canadians, the vast majority of Canadians, don't think Justin Trudeau did a very good job as Prime Minister and didn't run a very good government. But they were still willing to vote for the Liberals because they see, in part, Mark Carney as something new, something different and something better than Justin Trudeau, and something better than Pierre Poilievre, for that matter. But when you think about the Trudeau record and the Trudeau policies, whether it's dealing with the United States or dealing with Donald Trump or energy policy, oil and gas, selling Canadian energy abroad, dealing with the West, the role of government in people's lives, social programs, social safety net, housing affordability, pocketbook issues, immigration, national defense, debt, deficits, taxes, so many things we could talk about. And think about how the Trudeau government approached all those things and dealt with those issues. Think about Mark Carney and what you would like to see from him. That would be a departure from the Trudeau days. So think about it. Give us a call and tell us, how do you want Mark Carney to be different from Justin Trudeau? What do you want Mark Carney to do, to say, so he could show you that he's really different from Justin Trudeau and that his government will be different from Justin Trudeau? 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577 is our call-in line. You should save that number in your phone so you can put us on speed dial. And if you've never called before, just mention that to our call screener and we will make your call a priority. And your calls are coming up next as we begin the Thursday Talkback. I'm Rob Snow, and this is News Radio. Up first today on Talkback is Mike in Kincardine. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Mike.
I'm a conservative party member for 25 years, and I voted for Mark Carney because I believe he has the experience to deal with the current Trump crisis and the ability to transition us to new trading partners and transition our economy. Now, here is not what I did not vote for. I did not vote for the lack of accountability and integrity that the Justin Trudeau Liberals had. We all know the scandals, WE scandal, Rive scam, AgaGate, and all this other stuff, right? I expect him to hold people accountable. The second thing I'm expecting from him as well is to deal with the affordability issue. The third thing I want is military spending. And the fourth thing, which really should be in my thing, is to get rid of Guilbeault. That man That man did not reduce 1 ounce of carbon, did not build one public transit system, not anything like that. I want to see an effective climate plan, not a tax climate plan. So if he does that and builds energy corridors that allow our European allies to wean off Russian energy, I'm all for it. But if he does the Guilbeault eco-nutter, enviro-nutter stuff, I will be very disappointed. And that's my thoughts, Rob.
Okay, well, if he, just before you take off there, he made Mr. Guilbeault a cabinet minister again. He's not the environment minister anymore. He's going to be the heritage minister now, but he's also made him his Quebec lieutenant, which means he's the most powerful Quebec minister in the cabinet, despite all those other Quebec MPs that he has to choose from. So when he dispatches somebody to go speak with, say, for example, the Premier of Quebec, it's Mr. Guilbeault who's doing the outreach there. You don't like that idea?
No, I don't.
Right?
I think he's got more choices now that the Liberals have strengthened their hand in Quebec. And Guilbeault was a disaster as the environment minister. And also telling us that we're getting more money back in our carbon tax rebates. Not true. And that's another thing I want. I want someone to be straightforward with Canadians. If we're got to take some tough medicine, we can all accept that, but not outright lie. That's my biggest problem with Guilbeault.
All right, Mike. All right. Good list. Thank you, Mike. Very, very good start today. BC in Waterloo. Hello, BC. You're up next on Talkback. What's your opinion?
Well, Mike pretty much said everything I was going to say. Very well said.
Okay. Yeah. Good list, eh? Yeah.
Here's the thing. I don't sense that it's going to make a big difference to our friends on the right. I think that many people have been poisoned by the Trump effect, which states that, you should hate your opponent. Your political opponent is your enemy. They're not your friend. Don't talk to them. Don't negotiate with them. Don't believe anything they say. Everything they say is lies. I get the impression that that's happening here in Canada as well. The Conservatives
sure. Yeah.
are, they're vilifying everything that the Liberals do. And I think that'll go on. I don't think that that's going to change. And
You think it's just Conservatives who are guilty of that?
Well, I think Liberals have certainly done the same, but I certainly don't see the hatred coming from the left towards the right as it's coming from the right to the left. Of course, we're looking at a Liberal government that's been in power for 10 years. So, Conservatives, I think, they have a little bit more ammunition to launch. But until that changes, until our two parties and everybody in this country comes together and decides, you know what, we have to work together. We can't be divided. We can't vilify the other side just because we have some disagreements on policy. We all have to come together. But I just don't see that happening because I think that the toxicity is so high right now.
Okay. So you're hoping for more unity, I guess. More cross-partisan cooperation?
What I want more than anything
Less partisanship?
is for all Canadians to realize that we live in one of the greatest nations on the planet. We are very, very privileged. And a lot of the things that we complain about are what I call champagne problems. And, I'm not saying that we don't have some serious obstacles to overcome in Canada, but we are extremely blessed. And all of these people on the right who are saying Canada is no more, Canada is destroyed, it'll never be the same again, we should separate those out on the West Coast, it's just ridiculous talk.
Okay. Well, you can't escape the fact there are some serious issues in this country, though, sir. You can't downplay the fact that housing is unaffordable or that young people don't feel like they have a lot of hope about ever affording a home, or that food bank usage is exponentially higher than it was 10 years ago, or that homelessness is worse than it was 10 years ago. There are serious problems in the country.
For sure, but those are not problems that were only created by one government. And the tendency is to blame the current government, right? It's all the Liberals' fault.
Well, it's been there 10 years.
Not the 10 years that we endured of Harper. And there was plenty of damage done during that time. In fact, that's when the housing crisis really started. So again, pointing fingers and whataboutism and crying that we have nothing in this country is not going to get us anywhere.
Okay.
So I want more than anything for Mr. Carney to bring the country together and to try to
bring the country together
to the other side of the aisle and bring people together to work together instead of vilifying the other side constantly, because it's not working. It's not working.
All right, BC. Thank you. Thank you for your call. And we're off and running on Talkback for a Thursday. Jack in Cambridge. Hello, Jack.
Doing today, Rob?
I'm fine, Jack. How are you?
Super. Your first caller, I've heard him call him before. I don't believe he's a conservative, by the way. Anyway, he does know what he's talking about. And if he believes that Carney will be different, then he should know that the heat pump strategy is an investment of his through Brookfield, Train Furnaces. So you watch the incentives and bonuses that go to that company to increase heat pumps in homes. The second point is, I read his book Values, and I really wish more people had of. Even at the library, it was totally checked out. There will be no difference between the two. I'm hopeful there will be a difference because Carney's very smart, and obviously he's no dummy. And my fear is that he will execute in a way that is in his best interest, not ours. I'm a food, clothing, shelter, food, clothing, shelter, energy type of person voter. I want table issues, not the other social issues are important to me.
Right.
And I don't think the cost of anything is going to go down if your number one priority is to make sure every financial decision affects climate change. or is considering climate change. I don't think that's going to make things cheaper, but I'm hoping he does great. I hope we do great, and thanks for taking my call.
Okay, Jack, thank you. In Cambridge, not hopeful for much change, but thinks a lot more of the same is coming. Mike in Calgary. Hello, Mike.
Hi.
Hi, Mike.
Yeah, it's the fact that Carney's using the conservative lines there. In other words, you're saying that the capital gains tax is gone, and it just seems to be a lot of Poilievre's policies that he's using, and it's resonating with the public. If he really wants to prove to me that he's not anti-Alberta, I'm just waiting for Trump to deep six the Ontario auto sector the way Trudeau deep sixed our oil patch. That's all.
Okay, so is there anything that he can do to prove that he's different from Justin Trudeau, in your opinion? Like, there's a great sense of betrayal in the West about the way the Trudeau government treated the West. We talked a lot about that yesterday. Is there anything Mark Carney could do to you to prove that he's listening to concerns of people like you?
If he instills confidence in the oil patch, that would be a start.
Okay. And how could he do that?
Don't threaten putting a carbon tax on the production of oil and the burning of oil the way Trudeau did on Energy East. In other words, incentivize and guarantee there won't be any negative financial things for any any oil and gas development. And one question to you is, with all the carbon tax and stuff in the oil patch, has it reduced worldwide oil consumption, or has the profits just gone to different countries?
I believe oil consumption is the demand for oil is as great as it's ever been, as far as I know.
Yeah. So why do we let the Liberals take Canada out of the profit picture of oil and gas?
Okay. Well, the Conservatives will have to win an election. The Conservatives will have to win an election, Mike, I guess. Right?
So
thank you, though. Thank you. No, they're playing the music, Mike. We're right at a time. Right at a time, Mike. Thank you. But on energy, you make a good point. And Danielle Smith has her list of 9 demands, but just on oil and gas, there are things like Bill C-69, the emissions cap. He has so far said, I'm not going to touch Bill C-69, still supports an emissions cap. If he wanted to prove that he was different from Justin Trudeau, maybe he could rethink some of those policies. Be right back on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Mark Carney has said he's different from Justin Trudeau and he's going to run a different kind of government than Justin Trudeau did. How can he prove that to you? What can he say? What can he do to prove that he's going to be a different kind of prime minister and run a different kind of government than the Trudeau government? 1-833-668-2577. And we love to hear from first-time callers like Lori, who's called from Alberta. Hello, Lori.
Hi there.
Hi, Lori. Thanks for calling. What's your opinion?
So during the election, when the race leading up to the election, Carney was saying one thing to Quebecers in French and another thing to the West. Specifically, it was about the East-West pipeline. If Carney is going to identify himself and develop a persona that's different from Justin Trudeau, who was by far the most divisive prime minister that Canada has ever had, second only to his father, then he needs to define himself and his actions towards Alberta very differently from what his predecessor did. And he needs to govern the country equally as opposed to governing just for Ontario and Quebec, speaking out of each side of his face, because we're already seeing this. So where that gentleman from BC is saying that it's a really one-way flow of dislike or hatred or whatever he said towards from the right to the left, right. I would say that it's earned because there has been a systematic attack on the West from Ottawa, and it hasn't been a 10-year issue. It's been a 50-year issue. And it seems like this tariff crisis is only a crisis right now because it's impacting Ontario and Quebec and their economies. But the rest of the country needs to understand what Ontario and Quebec are experiencing now has been the very thing that the West has been dealing with for years and years and years. The attack on the oil and gas sector, and he needs to do something quite different.
So, I mean, he said, I'm from the West. You see him wearing an Edmonton Oilers jersey. He talks about his time growing up in Edmonton. Like, he's an Alberta guy, understands Alberta, understands the West. What can he do to prove that to you then?
Well, the C-69 tanker ban. So can someone explain to me why there is a tanker ban on the West Coast, but there isn't a tanker ban on the East Coast? When Quebec gets its oil, its energy products from Venezuela, so it comes up to St. Lawrence, how is it that the East Coast is so much more protected that they don't need a tanker ban, but the West Coast does need one?
Yeah. Okay. So that would be one example. Ending the bill that enacted that ban. Right. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, honestly, they were trying to take the knees out of the Alberta economy. Justin had picked up right where his father had left off.
Okay. Thank you, Lori, for being a first-time caller. Really appreciate your call today. Chris also calling from Alberta today. Chris. Hi, Chris. You with me there, Chris?
Yep.
Yeah, there we go. Got you now. Yep. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. Hey, Rob, thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to say that first I'll preface it with I don't think any change is going to happen. Things like dropping the carbon tax were, I think, simply just that was the campaign that Pierre was working against him, calling him carbon tax carny. An easy way to get, some popular votes was to scrap that and remove that power from Pierre's campaign. But, the last caller, Lori, made a good point. I mean, the thing that a strong leader, number one, would need to do is to go in the house and clean the house. If people weren't doing their job well, shifting them to other positions doesn't show strong leadership. It just shows someone trying to please his own party. A strong leader would come in and say, you know what, this guy's not doing his job, he's gone. But the thing that I think Lori was onto that I think is really key is that, when you watch the debate and you have, Quebec, Bloc Québécois, making comments that they have the culture as if anyone else doesn't, and it's only Quebec that has culture to preserve. But when he's making demands for aluminum plants and on the same breath saying no to oil and gas, that's where a strong leader can come in and say, you know what, everybody has wants, everybody has needs.
Right.
Everybody needs to be included and considered, and I think someone needs to call out the Bloc Québécois, call out Doug Ford, call out Ontario, and say, look, understand you guys have things you need, but Alberta as well does. And we working together, if you're going to work together, then everybody has to get a piece of the pie.
Especially when he was talking about, we can't have 13 economies. We need one economy.
Yeah.
Right. That was a line that he used repeatedly during the campaign.
But again, I don't think there's going to be any changes. It's the same cabinet. Freeland's still around. He's got what he needed and what he wanted to get. And now that he's there, I guarantee you there's not going to be much change.
Okay. All right. Okay. Not much optimism there. I mean, he has said, and we have it on tape here. Let's play a clip. I'm different from Justin Trudeau. Mark Carney on how I'm different from Justin Trudeau.
I am not Justin Trudeau. And you can see in the first month of my being Prime Minister, many of the differences. We canceled the carbon tax. We rolled back the capital gains hike. Huge focus on the economy. Ability to bring together all the provinces to get for agreements. diversification of our security partnerships with Australia, with the UK, with France, with the European Union, a totally different approach to housing, a openness and breadth of our energy superpower policy. So I can go on.
He says he's going to be a different kind of prime minister, much different from Justin Trudeau, run a different kind of government than Justin Trudeau ran. How can he prove that to you? Paul in Cambridge. Hello, Paul.
As a snake grows, it sheds its skin, but it's still the same snake. Justin Trudeau really admires China and the way they get things done under a basic dictatorship. And Carney, $250 million from the Chinese government. I think he really admires the Chinese government as well. So is there a difference? I see no difference. What was Carney's first big interview after the election? Was it with CBC? Was it with CTV or Global? Or was it with BBC, his home?
Well, you know the answer to that.
Yeah, so
right.
I'd say the same, something that starts with an S, different pile. But basically, That's what it is.
There's nothing he can do, nothing he can say. Is there a policy he could implement, a bill he could pass into law that would prove that to you, hey, this guy's different from Justin Trudeau? Maybe he is different from Justin Trudeau.
Carney has not done a thing in his life except for look at what the bottom line is, what is best for him and his financial future. All his decisions are based on how can he make money. He only ran to be the Prime Minister of Canada for his own financial reasons. So that, blind trust my butt.
He probably took a pay cut. He probably took a pay cut. Leaving
so
Brookfield.
Why would you do that?
Right?
Because he could. What did he do in England? He convinced the British government that any planes landing in Heathrow had to use a low emissions fuel. And where do you get that low emissions fuel? You buy it from a Brookfield Assets Management Company owned business. All Carney does is direct business towards his own.
There's nothing he could do. Nothing he could do. Okay, Paul, thank you. Let's move along to thank you, Paul. Thank you. Imran in Calgary up next. Hi, Imran. Hello, Imran. Hi, Imran. Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, I'm in Kitchener.
In Kitchener. Okay. Sorry about that. That's my mistake.
Thanks for taking my call. So I think next 100 days is very important for the Liberal government. And two things I'm thinking. One is to show very clear seriousness that Mr. Carney is ready to work with all the parties. The issues they raised already about our country, and also seriousness about working with all the premiers. Doesn't matter whether it's in the West or in the East. So there are a lot of issues. So he has to show real seriousness on those things. If it can't show, things will be different in 100 days. So that's one thing. And second thing is he needs to redesign his cabinet members. Because if he keeps the same cabinet members and reshuffle here and there, it will give a wrong signal to the Canadians. Because I can name so many cabinet members, people don't like them, and because of their like flip flopping, and dishonesty in some cases. Because those are the cabinet members, they supported the carbon tax and whatnot, right? And now they are saying, oh, it is not good. So he has to show some really positive change in the cabinet poll. Like if
you want to see new faces in different in the big jobs.
New faces, and third point, I could say that in some cases he has to show that he cares about the issues we're having, and sometimes directly involved, not only delegating somebody and that's it, hands off. Especially in the West. There are some issues with Alberta and something. So he has to really show that he really wants to solve those issues, not sending somebody and then doing nothing. That will not work. That's it. And sorry, one last thing.
Okay.
It didn't give me a good impression about Carney a few days ago when we heard the news from Donald Trump that he's going to visit U.S. Did you hear the news from our Canadian
yes. We have the clip of Donald Trump. Let's play the clip of Donald Trump. This was in the Oval Office.
I understand, but did you hear
yesterday.
it from Mr. Carney by himself? Did you hear it?
I did not hear Mr. Carney say that he was going next week.
That's what I'm saying. Like, why?
Right.
Why should we have to hear it from Mr. Trump? Like, why can't Mr. Carney can say us? I have a talk, and I'm going to visit U.S. very soon. It's a very big thing for us.
Okay.
And I just heard it from Mr. Trump.
Right. Okay.
This is surprising. If it is like that, then things will be different, I'm telling you. If you remember, Rob, I called your show and said about Pierre Poilievre, and people are scared. You know, he says something about not standing law. They have to understand the people's perception. That is also important.
Okay.
So that's my intake. That's it.
It's a very good take, sir. Thank you, Imran in Kitchener today for calling. Let's go to Dave in Calgary. Hello, Dave. You're up next, Dave. Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, Dave.
Yeah, I'm going to just say what I think he should do, and then I'll make an observation. Okay, he's got to get the natural gas to people in Europe that want it. And that would sure cut down on all this pollution stuff they're talking about.
Okay.
Or to India and China, whoever wants to buy it.
Right,
you need to make sure that, I don't care where Quebec gets it from the west, from the east, wherever. But they got to stop buying foreign oil when we got more than enough for this country. That would save them a lot of money and bring them more taxes, more jobs, and everything.
Yes.
And definitely one other thing. There's that small section of that pipeline that goes through the States. They got to figure out how to put it through Canada, because, I mean, that could be a real problem.
That, I can't remember the number of it. It's line 9 or line 5 or something like that. It's called that. Yes.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. One of the Great Lakes and stuff. I mean, they should be just going straight through Canada somewhere.
Right. Because that makes Canada vulnerable, of course, right? Yes.
Well, of course.
Yes.
And he's definitely got to get Guilbeault and Freeland out of the cabinet. I mean, those two were they were right up at the top of the Trudeau thing and responsible for a lot of mess.
Okay. Well, there's no doubt that, I don't know what's going to happen with Guilbeault. Guilbeault's been moved off. He's not in the environment portfolio anymore. He's going to be in charge of Canadian heritage, but that comes along with a whole host of other responsibilities like the CBC and internet regulations as well. So he'll be in charge of the Parks Canada as well. He'll be in charge of Parks Canada, I guess. The thing with Guilbeault is that he's the top guy. He's going to be the Quebec lieutenant. So he, like I told a previous caller, that's a pretty big deal.
I mean, it's probably almost as close to being a deputy prime minister as possible, I think.
Well, it's kind of almost like a diplomatic posting. I mean, you're the main messenger for the federal government to Quebecers and the Quebec power players. And I can tell you, Mr. Guilbeault is not going to be promoting a pipeline through Quebec anytime soon. That's for sure. And as for Freeland, he moved Freeland out of finance and gave her interprovincial affairs. So she's supposed to be doing the interprovincial trade barriers thing. I don't think she's going to be far from Mr. Carney. They're very close. Like, they're good friends. And I can't remember if, one is the godparent to one another's children or something like that. Like, they're very close friends. So.
Yeah, but you just got to look at what their record was in their other when they were ministers and other things, and it's not very good. And it's right. I mean, I don't think they should be ministers of paper clips or anything. And I don't know. This is just my impression. When I saw him, his victory speech or whatever you want to call it, somehow his body language didn't seem like he was telling the truth. Everything he said, he'd stop and he'd hesitate, like he was thinking of what he was reading from in his mind. I don't know. Something didn't look right there.
All right. I don't know. That was past my bedtime. I had called it a night before he started talking, so I didn't see it.
Totally
Okay. All right. Thank you, though, Dave. Thank you. You'd like to see some changes, right? You'd like to see some changes for sure. I understand that, Dave. Very good points all around. And that's hour number one of Talkback, a full hour of your calls just ahead as we talk about change and what Mark Carney can say or do to really prove that he is a change and things are going to change in Ottawa and that he's different from Justin Trudeau and his government will be different. More of your calls coming up right after the latest breaking news on Talkback on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
We've been talking about change today. Mark Carney says he's a change from Justin Trudeau. He's different from Justin Trudeau. We are asking, what can he do to prove that to you? What can he say? What can he do? What policies can he enact to prove that he really is different from Justin Trudeau and that a Mark Carney government will be different from a Justin Trudeau government? 1-833-668-2577. To Brian up next. Brian, you're on the air. Hello, Brian.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm good, Brian. How are you?
Never better. Never better.
Great. That's good.
The one thing that I think Carney could do if he wanted to show just a little bit of unity would be absolutely to fire Guilbeault or not have him involved in Parliament.
Okay.
And I understand he's the Quebec lieutenant right now.
Yeah.
But is it vitriol that people out west showed towards him because of his policies and his the one expression that I think we've heard before, it's about the economy, stupid. And that's really where the bottom line comes down to. If he's going to support the economy, then, by reducing red tape, by, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's the mining industry, whether it's the farming industry, for God's sakes, because the carbon tax was even killing the farmers with, whether they were drying grain or whatever it was, they were using their propane for and fuels for. Everybody was getting hit by JT. The one thing I will say for Carney that he's got going in his favor is he's not a career politician. He does have a financial background, and so I'm hoping out of hope, because knowing that I came from Alberta and Calgary, how we voted out here.
Sure.
But if we have somebody with some economic sense leading this country, there is a chance. So I would give, Carney would be 1,000 times better than JT. But
Guilbeault's got to go. Guilbeault's got to go.
To me, he's a cancer. The Prime Minister's office generally runs the country. The PMO's office has for 20, 30 years, and it's just gotten more and more under Justin Trudeau. But I have good feelings if that Prime Minister's office is under Carney, not if it's under the Liberal Party.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, good points all around. Thank you. To Danveer up next. Hi, Danveer. Good to hear from you, Danveer.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Danveer.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
Just one thing. So, if you look at it, what was going wrong, right, with Justin Trudeau? So,
yes.
One thing he did basically look into the economic consequences of any of the policies. So, we were all looking through the, last caller, through the green agenda. But the problem is, they base it, put all the weight behind Guilbeault, right? But Guilbeault is biased from the beginning, being a Greenpeace activist.
Yes.
So they their main agenda is anti-fossil fuel.
Right. Right.
But
Yes.
not even anti-fossil fuel. Like their main agenda is anti-Alberta or the oil sands, right? They all might be using all the oil and consuming it, but they just have something against one particular sector. So Carney has an advantage. Like he could be objective, but lately he's been emotionally involved with the same agenda.
Right.
But
So if he wants to come across, if he wants to prove to people that he's more moderate than, say, Justin Trudeau was, or more of a centrist or more business-minded, then you can't have like a fringe environmental radical professional protester as part of your government, like Mr. Guilbeault. Would that be a fair assessment?
Has to have an open and objective mind, right? You can't have bias going into any decision making. Or keeping the country united.
Right. Get rid of Guilbeault. That is a popular opinion today. Okay, thank you, Dan Veer. We'll fit in one more here. Let's go to Susan, who is called also today from Alberta. Hello, Susan.
Hi.
Hi, Susan.
I'm just calling because I'm amazed at the people that are not willing to give Mr. Carney a chance, especially from Alberta.
Right.
And I am so always annoyed by people from Alberta that are so angry with Justin Trudeau. He built us a pipeline that is now doubling our oil output.
Yes. Well, after his government chased away the company that was building the pipeline for a fifth of the cost.
Well,
with no taxpayer money.
That company decided it was too expensive to do that pipeline. They said no. Canadian
it was the government that made it too expensive.
Pipeline.
It was the government that made it too expensive. It was the government policies that chased that company away, just like they chased TransCanada away after it had spent $1 billion trying to build the Energy East pipeline. Government gets no credit for building the Trans Mountain expansion. No credit at all. It took a $5 billion project, had to nationalize it after it chased the company away, and it ended up costing taxpayers $35 billion. The government doesn't get to do a victory lap for that. Sorry.
Well, I totally disagree. I'm fine. The same thing with Pierre Elliott Trudeau. He wanted to build pipelines across this country. Conservatives in this province said no. And now that's what you want. That's what conservatives want. Build a pipeline across Canada. Well, they could have done it. And now they vilify Pierre Elliott Trudeau for that.
Well, because Pierre Elliott Trudeau's vision was that Alberta should sell its oil for half price. And unemployment soared and bankruptcies.
That was Lougheed that decided that wasn't good enough. Can you imagine the money that we would have made all these years if we'd had that pipeline?
Well, I'm telling you, it was unacceptable. First of all, the National Energy Program, that the Alberta should have to sell its oil for half price. And we saw the ramifications of what happened because of the National Energy Program. There's a reason they've never forgiven.
OPEC dropped the price of oil. That wasn't Pierre Elliott Trudeau's fault. OPEC dropped the price of oil.
Well, the National Energy Program came after the OPEC crisis. National Energy Program came into effect in 1980. But anyway, you think the anger toward the Liberal parties is misplaced and unjustified. That's fair enough. And you think they should give Mark Carney a chance, right?
Well, absolutely, because in this province, I have lived here 73 years. And in all those 73 years, the only government I got was for 4 years. So these people that are complaining that they don't get a vote, they don't get a say because Ontario and Quebec, I don't get a say in this province ever. Never. 4 years. That's it.
Okay.
So it works both ways.
Right.
Anyway,
and by 4 years, you mean the Notley NDP government? Is that what you mean? The Notley NDP government? Is that the 4 years you're talking about? Okay. All right, Susan. No, look, I it's good to have that view. Thank you. And I appreciate it. All opinions are welcome here. We can disagree. We don't have to be disagreeable. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio. We have been asking, what can Mark Carney do? What can Mark Carney say to prove that he will be a different kind of prime minister than Justin Trudeau, run a different kind of government? Sharon in Calgary. Hi, Sharon. You're up next, Sharon.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Sharon.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine. Go ahead.
Good. Okay. So Carney has said he wants to create a clean energy corridor. He didn't say that corridor would be for oil. He also said he wouldn't repeal Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines bill. That has to be repealed in order for Alberta's oil industry to thrive. But just as important as Bill C-69 is Bill C-48. It's got to be repealed too. And this is to Lori's point, an earlier caller. This bill is the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act that prohibits large oil tankers, those carrying more than 12,000 metric tons of crude, from stopping or unloading at any ports and marine installations on British Columbia's north coast. This ban extends from northern tip of Vancouver Island to Alaska border. So we don't need a pipeline east. If Bill 69 were repealed, then the Eagle Spirit Energy Corridor could be built. And this is an Indigenous project that formerly the Heritage Chiefs opposed, but now most are on board for. So if this pipeline, we're done, it would take the oil from Fort McMurray to Prince Rupert. It's 6 times larger than TMX, but it faces a problem, BC-48. So long as that bill remains, then this pipeline would have to be routed a short distance across the river from Prince Rupert to Alaska. Then all those high-paying jobs would be given to Americans instead of First Nations. But hey, Canadian oil would then be able to be picked up and transported down that same northern BC coastline that Bill C-48 prohibits being picked up from a Canadian port like Prince Rupert. Carney also needs to ensure Albertans will not he will not impose an emissions cap on Alberta's oil and gas.
Emissions cap.
Because that's basically a production cap. And just Pierre Trudeau's National Energy Program in 1980, that took 20 years for the industry to recover from. An emissions cap would probably destroy Alberta's industry, and this time around, it may never recover.
Okay, so I will say, Mr. Carney. Mr. Carney, during the election campaign, said he wanted to make Canada a clean energy and conventional energy superpower. But you say he won't be able to do that as long as the tanker ban is in place, right? And as long as the emissions cap is in place. And if he wants to prove that he's different from Justin Trudeau, those two pieces of legislation have to go. Yeah, gotcha, Sharon. Thank you very much. Yeah. Look, we're a little tight on time right now. Need to do some catching up. So we're going to stop here and we'll be right back. What can Mark Carney do to prove to you that he's different than Justin Trudeau? Let's go to Airdrie. Chris is in Airdrie. Hello, Chris.
Hey, how are you, Rob?
I'm good, Chris. Just rolling with it.
Yeah, you can hear me all right?
Yeah, hear you just fine, Chris. Go ahead.
Hi. Thanks a lot for taking my call. The two things, I'm going to keep it short and sweet for you. The gun ban.
Gun ban, yeah.
Gun ban for sure. I've got a couple nice older semi-automatic rifles that I use for hunting that I've gotten inherited, and I don't want to turn those in. I don't think anybody's turned them in. It's a waste of money.
Yeah.
Right? And the second thing, I don't know if it's already in the works, but maybe getting a new team under them, like a new cabinet.
Yeah, that's a popular opinion today. Yeah.
Yeah,
that is a popular opinion that people don't want to see people like Chrystia Freeland there, and certainly Stephen Guilbeault has got a kind of a target.
Number one on my list, Rob. Stephen
Number
Guilbeault.
one on your list. Yeah.
Number one. But those are the two things for me.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold out hope for any change on the gun issue. You know, the ban on so-called assault weapons and the gun buyback program. They made a pretty big deal. They spent a whole day on the campaign talking about it. They made an announcement about it, about how they were going to accelerate the gun buyback program. They had a pretty high-profile gun activist running for them in Quebec and won from the group, Polly Souvant. She's a survivor of the mass shooting at École Polytechnique. So I wouldn't expect any movement on firearms legislation. If anything, it'll be status quo on that, I think. I understand what you're saying.
It is common sense, though, with the guns. Like, if there's somebody that really wanted to do something bad to people, they're going to find a different way to do it rather than use a gun. Who knows? There's other forms, other ways, but that's right. That's in the hands of the government. Hopefully, hopefully they can drop it for us. I know it doesn't sound like it, but that's just my opinion. And
I appreciate it, Chris. Yeah.
Okay.
And you
I got to get back to work, Rob.
Well, you get back to work, and I'll go back to work, Chris. Thank you so much. Let's go to Cambridge, Ontario. Peter is on the line. Hello, Peter.
Hi, Rob. How's it going?
Good, Peter. Thanks. What can Mark Carney do for you to prove that he's different than Mr. Trudeau was?
Well, first of all, I'm a Liberal voter, but I've had a hard time voting for Trudeau in recent years just because of the overspending of the Liberal Party, generally on left-leaning politics. What I'd like Mark Carney to do is use more of a centrist attitude when it comes to our politics, and I'm looking for him to make cuts. I would like a little bit more government efficiency, because I feel like we're in a time where we have to redirect our resources into our economy. And in times of abundance, it's easy to vote left because left is about spending money on social programs and things like that. Unfortunately, I don't think we're in a place where we can have extravagant spending on programs. I just don't see it at this current point. And I'm hoping that he makes Western Canada feel more closer and together with us. They obviously have a lot of grievances over the past 10 years. I can understand their view on things. So I'm looking for him to build those bridges.
Build bridges. Okay. All right. But maybe you want to see some progress on the fiscal side of things, debt, deficits, program spending, that sort of thing.
And I'm hoping with his PhD in economy that he realizes that those things need to happen.
Yeah. Okay. Good points. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah. I mean, I would say if there was a moment of regret for the Liberals, even though in the end, they won the election, the big mistake during the campaign was the platform. I mean, that was a mess of a platform, because for weeks and weeks and weeks, Mark Carney and the Liberal campaign team had been trying to convince Canadians we're a change. We have a new leader, and look at all his credentials and look at his financial background. Worked on Wall Street, worked in finance all over the world, governor of 2 central banks, worked at the Department of Finance. Right? He's the real deal. This is not the platform of a drama teacher, part-time snowboard instructor. And yet they release a platform, and it's like a Justin Trudeau platform on steroids. So maybe, I don't know, when the House comes back, they'll have to prepare for a budget at some point. Maybe there's a chance to reverse course on some of that. I mean, Mark Carney, is he really going to move forward, I guess, with all the spending that was in that platform, and borrow all that money and run up all of that debt and, leave the next generation to pay the bill? Is he going to do that? I mean, this was a guy who during the Liberal leadership was saying how proud he was to have worked with Paul Martin, and when Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien were trying to balance the budget, even if the timing doesn't quite add up. He spoke highly of the fiscal discipline of the Paul Martin, Jean Chrétien government, and yet then presented and defended an election platform that in no way resembles what Jean Chrétien or Paul Martin, what that Liberal government was doing at the time. It was just kind of more of the same. No concern for fiscal guardrails, lots of new spending and deficits as far as the eye can see. And in fact, this week, one of the big institutional credit rating agencies, Fitch, issued a note and said if the federal government follows through with this kind of spending plan, that Canada's AAA credit rating could be at risk. And you know what happens when that happens? If the credit rating of the country gets downgraded, then it will cost more to service the debt, and any new bonds that the Canadian government sells would have to have a higher interest rate. Mark Carney knows that. Of course he knows that. He ran the Bank of Canada, for crying out loud. So to to Peter's point, maybe if he wanted to show he was a different kind of politician than Justin Trudeau, rip up that platform and start from scratch on the fiscal side of things. Anyway, more of your calls ahead. Jeff in Cambridge. Hello, Jeff.
How are you, Rob?
I'm good, Jeff. How are you doing?
Good. What about bringing back integrity to Canada?
Okay. How could he do that?
Well, scandalous 4 years.
Right.
Trudeau's government, 9 years, brought in 15 scandals, according to Wikidiki.
Okay.
From 1873 to 1960, 87 years in span, 4 scandals. And from 1990 on, it was horrendous for the scandals in government for Canada.
Right. Okay. So what can he do to improve that situation?
I would go back to Trudeau's time and maybe bring up a few topics and see if they're worth investigating, and maybe bringing Trudeau back into courts for follow-ups.
Okay.
And then having a scandalous-free 4 years. Bring Canada back to where it should be.
Okay. Or there could be new ethics laws written, for example. That if you let's say you violate, you commit an ethics violation. You're found to be in a conflict of interest, right? Maybe if you're found to be in a conflict of interest, maybe there should actually be some punishment for that. Instead of just a $500 fine and you carry on as though nothing happened and you don't even lose your cabinet post.
No. Or you get moved.
Or you get moved. But, maybe if you were found of an ethics violation, you don't get to be a minister of the Crown. And you lose your $100,000 raise. And you don't get the driver. And no, you don't get to run a government department. You don't get all the privileges and perks that come with being a cabinet minister.
Yeah, it's a shame. Canada's gone down the drain.
I'm not ready to say it's gone down the drain, but there are things that can be improved, right? There are things that can be improved, and Mark Carney says he's going to be a different kind of prime minister than Justin Trudeau was. You say ethics and accountability would be a good place to start, and I'm not disagreeing with you, Jeff in Cambridge. Thank you. Let's go to Kitchener. Vicky is in Kitchener. Hello, Vicky.
Hi, Rob. How are you today?
Hi, Vicky. I am good. Vicky, how are you today?
Oh, I'm okay.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Mark Carney.
Yeah.
He really can't do anything for me because who was Trudeau's financial advisor for the last 5 years?
Right.
Yeah, he's a scary guy. He's a scary guy, and I think when he goes to see Mr. Trump,
right.
I think Mr. Trump is lulling us into a false sense of security.
Okay.
And he's saying, he picked the lesser of two evils and how it was a close race, and he wants to talk to Carney. Mm-hmm. Well, I think Mr. Carney is going to go in with his, I'm the money guy and I'm an economist and I can make this guy bend to my ways. And Mr. Trump is going to see it different, and I think he's going to look at Brookfield Asset Management, and I think he's going to look at the tax evasion that took place in Canada, and I think he's going to level one on Mr. Carney, and then it's going to get leveled on Canada. That's what I'm worried about.
I don't know.
Because I think he's going to look into some things and say, you weren't very honest with Canadians about your books. And he hasn't done any disclosure. He hasn't let us know what his interests are.
Okay.
And it's scary for me right now. I'm 60 years old, and I've been working 2 jobs for the past 5 years just to try and maintain. My wages aren't going up, but my hours are.
Okay.
And everything else is going up. And I don't want to see this for my kids or my grandkids. I want them to have the grow up that I had, and I'm seeing this at this age. My mom is 96. and lives in Sudbury, and she was really hoping for a change. She was hoping that at the end of her life she was going to get to see some good things happen. And I hope that Mr. Carney doesn't get blindsided by Trump, and I hope he does try and do something to make us not see him as, well, Justin's
more of the same, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he to me, he was implanted because Justin got kicked out, but he was the financial advisor for the Trudeau government.
Well, he's won an election now, so Canadians, enough Canadians have put their trust in him, and I just want to know and part of the reason, not the whole reason, but part of the reason is he's not Justin Trudeau. He convinced people he's not Justin Trudeau, but you're not sure of that just yet.
Yeah, no, it's gonna take a minute, and I pray for this whole country. This is my country, and I love it with all my heart.
Sure thing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All the best to you, Vicky. All the best to you.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Let's go to Dan in Calgary. Hi, Dan.
Hello. Hey, how are you,
Dan.
Rob?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Hey, the sky's blue out here where I am.
That's good.
So it seems to me there's lots of sour grapes out there. I'm expecting Mark Carney to do exactly what he said he's going to do, and that's what the majority of people voted him in for. So, ultimately, most of these people calling in are basically saying what he can't do instead of what he could do. So, I actually did want to ask you about the tanker ban.
Would you have voted for Justin? Let me ask you, Dan. Would you have voted for Justin Trudeau for the Liberals if Justin Trudeau was still the leader?
Rob. Actually, I'm of the mind. Of course, all politicians do have a date stamp. Yeah. And I understand that he'd been in a long, long time, but no one talks about the good things he did, and he did do some good things. And that's one of the things I wanted to say. That the pipeline, I got to push back on you a little bit because it wasn't Justin Trudeau or the federal government. It was mostly BC government and First Nations, and justifiably so. That held it up. But primarily, Kinder Morgan saw that their costs were running hugely overpriced, and that's why the federal government got involved. So I think Justin Trudeau and Rachel Notley deserves credit for getting that pipeline through.
Okay, well, we'll just agree to disagree on that. All right.
Well, okay. So, and the tanker ban moratorium, the way it's put across, people seem to think that the whole West Coast is banned to tankers, and it's mostly inside passage, and was deemed to be a very, very critical spot. That if there was a problem, you could have major problems, and most of the First Nations, or all the First Nations on that inner part of the coast, didn't want it to occur. So, and again, they have the right to do that. So we don't have a total tanker ban on the West Coast.
Okay. All right. Okay. So do you think Mark Carney has to prove at all that he's different than Justin Trudeau? It sounds like you're...
I think he already has. I think he's
you think he already has? Okay.
He has. He's made some stuff with Trump. He said he's going to work towards, making Canada an energy superpower by incorporating conventional as well as alternatives. And, certainly there's a certain segment of the population in the country that thinks that means he's not going to do pipelines. Well, we have to give the man a chance. We have to let him get in there, see what he does. He's going to have that trip down to the U.S. Let's see how that comes out. He's got to have that opportunity to act on what he said he would do.
All right, Dan. Fair enough.
Is that not fair?
I think it's fair. Yeah, I think it's fair. I think if he fails, there'll be consequences for that.
Oh, of course.
Part of the reason that he was elected was he was saying, "I'm not Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau is gone, and things are going to change around here."
And he's not. And I think all these talking points to go back to that he was the financial advisor. That, people they want to put that impression out that he was running the country, not Justin Trudeau. He's even said he'd given him some points. He wasn't the financial advisor for 9 years, like so many people say. So yeah, he is new. He's somebody new. He's a different person. He said he's going to do stuff different. So we got to give him the chance, Rob.
All right. Yeah. Well, he has his chance now. He's not going anywhere, at least for a couple of years. And I think when the next election is called, it will be called because it will be best for him and the Liberal Party. I'm just going to say, and we'll close this off, and thank you for all your calls today. He will have to convince Canadians that he's not Justin Trudeau, because if he's just an Ivy League educated version of Justin Trudeau, a lot of Canadians will not buy into that. Even though Trump loomed large in this election, change was still a big issue. And I don't think the Liberals should be under any illusion that the status quo is going to cut it. If they offer just more of what Justin Trudeau offered during the last 9 years, it will not take long for the shine to wear off on this new Liberal government and this new Prime Minister. Back with the Friday Free-for-All Talkback tomorrow. Hope you can join us then. The latest breaking news is coming up next on News Radio.